going to start with a very basic question, like any exam. What is your name and what do you do?
My name is Toit. I'm CEO of the Good People Data Company.
Lovely, lovely. You seem excited to be here.
I've never been on a casting couch.
Never been. Okay, no, but we'll jump straight into it. So how did you start your journey as an entrepreneur?
I've always been entrepreneurial. Started from quite a young age where I made everything from crossbows, polishing rocks, and then tried selling them to neighbours. In 2017, the Empire Partner team came knocking on my door. I was living in London and I jumped at the opportunity to start an entrepreneurial journey with them.
So wait, you started off by selling like these small things to neighbours?
Yes, when I was 5. I wanted money to buy sweets. So what we would do, my brother and I, is we would go around, we'd actually go and pick sticks, and we would make proper crossbows and like little bows and arrows, and then we'd go around selling them to all the neighbours. I think they bought them more out of pity than anything else, but bottom line is I got to build something, sell something, and buy sweets, which is a perfect outcome.
Because in my head I'm thinking, okay, who needs crossbows though? Like who would want crossbows in that day?
If a little 5-year-old kid comes to your door selling something he made himself, you're probably going to buy it.
Okay,
so I think it was much more of a pity buy than anything else.
I'm not going to reject the 5-year-old. Okay, yes. What do you got? Let me take it off your hands. It's fine. And how much did you sell it for?
Well, we started with R2 and then we went up to R5, which is actually quite a lot of money at the time for a young kid.
Inflation, basically.
Yeah, supply and demand.
I was going to say, you learned about inflation at such a young age.
Yeah, and the same people ended up buying the same stuff over and over, so it was great.
Lovely, repeat customers.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
And seeing that you have so much knowledge within the information technology sector, was this a path that you always saw yourself treading on?
Solving problems, yes. Ending up in a forensic and compliance data space, not so much. It's always been a space that's been quite a challenging one to make exciting, and we're trying to bring technology to the fore to enable transactions between parties from pretty much anywhere. So we're trying to change the mold. It's something that we evolved to much more than something we set out to do originally. But we are solving a $5.127 trillion problem in fraud and collusion management and proactive detection of fraud and collusion on the global market. So it's a big task. We've got a big job ahead of us.
Yeah. And would you say there's a correlation between, with you starting out being a young entrepreneur and where you find yourself now? Do those factors still meet each other halfway at any given stage?
The ability to find a problem and to identify a solution to a particular problem, yes. And the entrepreneurial, the trading spirit, that typical bartering spirit's always been there. So the ability for me to go to somebody to say, hey, I can solve your problem, but you need to pay me X for it, that has never ever changed, and I think that came from a very, very young age.
I love it. So I say, for me, it's always just the case that we are moving, obviously, within a technological space. Correct me if I'm wrong, the 4th industrial revolution.
Or 5th, yes.
5th, sorry. And finding ourselves in that space, would you say the importance of what you do, or what you do in general, the importance of it, moving forward, how can I put it into correct terms? What level of importance, that's a better way of saying, what level of importance do you find yourself doing what you do currently?
Some of the biggest challenges that our continent currently faces, with a particular focus in Africa, is around fraud and collusion. As technology evolves and grows and people's adoption of technology evolves and grows, so do the ability for individuals to manipulate particular systems, processes and technologies. Our job is to prevent fraudulent activities and fraudulent individuals from entering those systems in the first place. So if we are able to do our job well, we'll be able to curb a huge amount of online fraud moving forward and in future by building trust between transacting parties. That could be everything from biometric verifications of individuals to anti-money laundering screening, the ongoing monitoring of transactions and activities in order to prevent fraud, collusion, or whatever else the case might be. So we are quite a pivotal piece in a very, very big cog, and we're hoping that our enterprise grows and actually supports the entire continent in future. So it's quite an important issue we're addressing.
And can you maybe just give us sort of one practical example of something that you might face on a day-to-day basis, or something that you would see in terms of on
Phew.
the floor?
Yeah,
Giving away too much.
I can give you guys a huge list. We were recently pulled into to a project where we were tasked with auditing a particular procurement process. So for one procurement process, we found 110 commercial conflicts of interest between employees and companies that were putting their names forward for that particular piece of work. We then went further and we found 19,500 compliance issues in one organization within 3 days of our technology actually being deployed. So it was big. We saved over 650 million rand in transaction fees by actually stopping some of the activity within the organization that was happening. Yeah, it's big.
That's big.
Yes.
It's monumental.
And that's one client. They've never ever done those checks, and they've been doing these systems and processes for the last 5 years.
What?
Yeah, it's big.
I would like to be on a fly on the wall just to see these things happen in real time, honestly
Yeah.
speaking.
So another, maybe a slightly more practical example that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to is we build onboarding systems for companies. Some of these are for social housing. So we make social housing available to everyone. So any person can apply for a social house from the comfort of his or her home via the agents that currently use our technologies. So a person can now sit at home and they can go and upload all their documents. They can biometrically verify themselves. We can pull their bank statements, do all their credit checks, so that the agent managing that property knows that whoever has applied is a proper person fit for that particular property. So we're providing access to certain goods and services using the technologies, and it's amazing to see how people also who should not be deserving of those particular benefits try and get in there and then abuse those services for their own benefit. And we spend a lot of time preventing those as well. Examples are people applying for properties on behalf of other third parties, and then they collude with internal agents. So all of those are things we're exposed to on a daily basis.
I was going to say, yeah, that's quite a prevalent one. I've heard of such stories as well, where third parties get involved, or it's done on behalf of third parties so that there's no middleman or anything like that.
Correct. So what we now do is we do the ongoing monitoring of all of the individuals who got those benefits. And if there are things like home address changes, a life decease changes, marital status changes, then the system automatically re-evaluates whether that person still qualifies for that particular property or not. One of those examples, again, is if somebody gets a particular housing benefit, the regulation states that he or she is not allowed to own another property. Quite often what the people do is they'll go for that particular benefit, they'll get their social house, but what they'll then do is the next month they go and they buy another property, because now all of a sudden they've got disposable income, then they rent the social house out. So there's a lot of practical issues in terms of the challenges that we're addressing to make the lives of everyday South Africans better using technology.
Okay, well, obviously in the light of that, I'll jump onto the next topic, which is how are you encouraging innovation?
We have daily workshops with all of our teams, where all the teams can basically provide their 2 cents and their inputs every morning at 9. If you come to my boardroom, you'll see all the guys sitting around. Right now, I think it's a little bit more, pushing the cart and making sure we keep our clients and execution plan happy. But a lot of our technology guys, I was chatting to one of our youngsters this morning, one of our interns, and he's spending his evenings and weekends learning new coding technologies, which he then wants to bring in and incorporate within our environment. So our youngsters have a lot of freedom. They also get to choose most of the coding languages for new projects. They get to basically decide which frameworks they want to use. Even though we have quite a strong and regimented DevOps and operating environment and quite strict guidelines, because obviously we're very heavily regulated, the youngsters are always free to bring new ideas and concepts and everything else to the table in our daily stand-ups at 9 every morning.
Love it. Now here's a question that you've probably heard or had come across your path quite often. Do you have any regrets?
Plenty.
In your career path, do you have any regrets?
Plenty. I don't think you're an entrepreneur if you haven't failed a couple of times, and I think all of us have had opportunities to grow and to fail, which is one of the things that I think makes this environment so successful and so good to be in. We allow people to fail, and I'm no exception. We learn every single day, but if there's one big regret, it's not understanding my target market well enough before going to address that particular market with technology, and not spending enough time in the space and actually understanding the client pressure points before putting your own technology forward.
So in the light of that, though, would you say that the saying fail fast, fail forward brings any truth?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because you cannot give up too quickly just because of one or two setbacks. Fail fast, companies like SpaceX would have given up after their second or third failure as opposed to pushing forward. Certain concepts work, certain ones don't. Certain ones, it's a great concept, the positioning is incorrect. If you truly believe in something, you will be willing to fail at it until you get it right. So fail fast is a big corporate term in order to manage losses so that everybody doesn't just go into plenty of different directions. But if you're a true entrepreneur and you've got the ability to continue failing or repositioning, I definitely suggest doing that if something's important enough.
Love it, love it. What do you think can be done to encourage entrepreneurship and growth in South Africa itself?
We need much more exposure for our youth in terms of technologies and giving them a voice in terms of the daily issues and the solutions which they bring. We need more platforms like the Innovation Campus and the EPF Tech Hub for youngsters to start engaging with technology and actually understanding what's available, what's possible. It is something where I think we're falling quite far behind, or we have fallen quite far behind. The good thing is to see quite a number of government and private initiatives where people are now starting to invite the youth into almost like think tanks and workshops and hackathons where the youngsters can actively participate in finding solutions to everyday ailments and issues they face.
Love it. Okay, this is a spin-off question because obviously I've always wanted to ask this before. Is there any truth in, these movies sometimes when it comes to hacking and IT, these old specs and stuff like that? When you watch those type of things,
yes.
Is there any correlation? Is there any truth in that? Or do you watch it and you can be like, oh,
yeah, I think.
With the little green screen thing or
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth. I think there's a lot of things that happen that we don't know. Typically, movies focus on the very, very big things. I think under our noses, things like social engineering are actually a lot more prevalent than we realize. And those things, the common person on the street may not even realize has been impacted. Basic identity theft through very, very easy and simple means. I've heard of examples in South Africa, as an example, more than 2,000 people a year get married without even knowing it because of identity theft. So if we think fraud, you have your big fraud, and then you've got your things that practically happen every single day on micro fraud. People with very basic IT skills are able to get into something, access an ID number, do a basic check, and then figure out the person's not married, and then, go through. So we have a unique and beautiful challenge on our hands.
I mean, how do I tell my lady, hey, listen, I think I'm married.
Have you checked? Have you actually checked with Home Affairs?
So
there we go.
That's a new fear unlocked.
Correct. So there might have been a foreigner or somebody who might have bribed somebody else who would have gotten access to your ID number via a mean, who could then have gone and organized a marriage using your ID number. You would not know. It happens more than 2,000 times a year in South Africa.
I hope I'm not one of those. Okay.
Yeah? No, it's always worth checking. But that is why some of the monitoring tools that have now recently come out, brought out by some of the bureaus, obviously I won't mention them, but why it's very good to actually monitor your online identity and see what's happening with your ID number, new loan accounts, what type of exposure there is against you, which you may not even be aware about. So in the movies, you see the big and exciting things. Practically, things happen under our noses every single day without people realizing it.
My goodness gracious. I'm shook. I'm shook. Okay, and lastly, what advice would you give to the youth in South Africa who are looking to be entrepreneurs?
Firstly is do your research and plan. One thing I've learned is that nobody will ever turn you away if you've got a really good question to ask. So ask for help. Speak to individuals. You are always welcome to via platforms like LinkedIn. Contact CEOs of businesses. I've got youngsters contacting me every single week saying, have you got advice on this? Can you help on that? How do we do this? And I've never ever turned any one of them away. And I would suggest youngsters to be bold. Ask questions and truly understand the problem that you're trying to solve. From there are numerous organizations. I mean, we host monthly hackathons where we're tackling 10 societal issues via EPF, via the Empire Partner Foundation. Get involved. If you've got an idea, if you have a business idea and you want to tackle everything from transport problems to healthcare, to GBV, to agriculture, to water, whatever the case might be, if you've got ideas around that, have a look at the hackathons. Be bold, ask questions, and get involved in the local business community. If you truly have a passion, then ask. Don't start anything that you are not willing to fail at. Be willing to fail, be willing to learn, and be willing to try again after failure. That's the motto.